Hey everybody, Stephanie Shields, and I'm back here talking to Dr. Avni Dalal today. Sorry about that. And we are going to be talking about helping you with hirsutism. Now, I'm going to admit this. Once I found out that Dr. Dalal was one, a patient of Sons of Pello, and two, an advocate for PCOS, and a helper in the community, I went a little crazy and I stalked your page. Okay, I'm just going to be honest there. And I found so many similarities in our story that I was just like, oh, we've got to do this. So that's why I tagged you last week and I said, please. So I'm glad that you're here. Tell us about yourself.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, of course. But anyways, my name is Dr. Avni Dalal. I am a licensed naturopathic doctor, and I'm really passionate about helping women and gender diverse individuals feeling really good about their bodies and feeling empowered through their own healing journeys. The majority of my practice focuses on PCOS, period pain, endometriosis, thyroid issues, and all the related mental health conditions that happen in association with PCOS and thyroid disease. So my approach is integrative, and it's also individualized by utilizing mind-body medicine therapy and nutraceuticals, botanical medicine, and different supplements, and then of course nutrition and lifestyle counseling. So that's a little bit about me.
That is a really cool list. That was actually one of the big things that like drew me to you, was the fact that you do understand that PCOS is gender diverse. And at the end of the day, like, you really understand that it is a full umbrella that we need to cover for a lot of people that have, to face PCOS from all genders. And so that was incredibly important to me. But I found it additionally amazing that you yourself come from a community that is more prone to having unwanted hair and trying to do all that they can to reduce the appearance of that. As an Italian woman myself, same thing. A lot of times people look at us and they're like, okay, so like gorgeous and ethnic and wonderful. But they also don't understand that a lot of what we're going through is like cultural hair problems and like nutrition-based issues and stressors and that kind of stuff. And so we are kindred spirits there, my friend. So I'm pretty excited to have this conversation with you. Today, we're really going to focus on helping you, the patient, understand your hirsutism that you're facing. And like, we're going to talk about the medical side of it. And on the electrologist, we're going to talk about how we can treat this for the patient. So I really want to start with a small tidbit. As an electrologist and laser technician for the last 19 years, a lot of times people don't understand that the hirsutism they're facing is actually a symptom of something going on behind the scenes. So they just see hair and they think that it's their problem and it's not mixed with anything else. So we become like a first diagnostic to something behind the scenes, because they're going for cosmetic first versus medical and not understanding that it's driven by something medical. So as an electrologist, when we see something, a lot of times we want to push them in your direction and say, it's not for the hair that's on the table now, but we're trying to help stop any new growth for dormant follicles. Okay. So when I see somebody come in, I need to be able to say, one, who do you go look for? Okay. Are we looking for a naturopathic doctor? Are we looking for an endocrinologist? Are we looking for a gynecologist? Okay. Where is our starting point? Okay. One, what are the labs once we get there, the testing, that kind of stuff? And what are the conversations that we might face in conjunction with the symptom that's happening, which is hirsutism? So I'm going to let you take the floor for this. So I saw the patient. I was like, okay, you need to go see a medical provider about this. What will I need to say to them to help them direct their conversation?
Well, first of all, I think that's a really important thing, right? Because that topic of, I'm not feeling very good in my body, but I just want to like patchwork and get rid of it in whatever way I can. but truly investigating what's going on is like the big picture, and a little bit of a headache for the patient as well, right? It's like you're uncovering all these layers like an onion, like what really is going on. So first of all, the starting point for hirsutism is we have to figure out what exactly is causing it. PCOS is the number one cause of hirsutism, but there are other reasons, whether it can happen, like you said, with ethnicities, like some ethnicities, whether you're Mediterranean, South Asian, or Middle Eastern, our tissue is more receptive to androgens. So we are hairier in a sense. But then there's also things that happen like pregnancy, that where you can have hirsutism that pops up here and there. Drugs, medications can also lead to symptoms of hirsutism, but today we're talking about PCOS and hirsutism because that's obviously such a big factor. So when we're talking about PCOS and hirsutism and how to investigate that, obviously labs are really important. Labs and blood work help us figure out what exactly is going on. Where is this elevated androgens? Androgens are our sex hormones, and that's what is a big driver for hirsutism. So where is that coming from? Because our body produces them either in the adrenal glands, which are these small little glands, little tissue sitting on top of the kidneys. So you hear a lot about adrenals, and a lot of people in the health and wellness community talk about balancing your adrenals. So that's what we're talking about, these little glands sitting right on top of the kidney. They produce androgens, but for a lot of us that menstruate, we have a lot of androgens that are being produced by the ovaries. So figuring out that is really important. And what can help us figure that out is blood work, like I mentioned. So there's a few things. We can do free and total testosterone. That's the big androgen or sex hormone that we think of when we think of hirsutism. Mm-hmm. But there's also DHEAS, which is, these are all different precursors and metabolites of the whole sex hormone cascade. There's like many, many steps and many hormones that play into this whole pathway. So we have free and total testosterone, DHEAS, we have DHT. You can also check FSH and LH, which is coming from the brain. And those are basically signaling the body to make different hormones at different times of the cycle. So those are some big ones, along with checking cortisol. I really do think that cortisol can be a good way to figure out if stress is like this big factor that can be leading to hirsutism, or if you have an issue with cortisol production like Cushing's. So there's all these different labs that can really help. And then I think you also wanted to talk about cortisol and testosterone and that whole pathway and how that really plays into why hirsutism happens. And what happens is that cortisol, which is our big stress hormone, gets released when we're in this chronic stress, or if you actually have some sort of adrenal disease. But specifically, cortisol can lead to increased insulin production as well, which is another aspect of PCOS, right? That insulin resistance and improving insulin sensitivity. So cortisol leads to more insulin, and more insulin leads to more testosterone, and more testosterone leads to hirsutism. So when we're thinking about hirsutism and we're thinking about PCOS, it's very multi-layered, it's very multifactorial. And as a naturopathic doctor, it's my job to be very mindful that we are covering all of the bases when we are figuring out how to address this. So I hope that answers it in some sort of way.
We're looking for like the start of this conversation, right? I mean, because the thing is this is a tiptoe, and everybody that's going to watch this, I want you guys to think about the fact that, like, this is just the start of the conversation. These are things to think about, to walk into your doctor and say, hey, I'm starting to really see issue here. And that's why I'm almost being a little too purposefully vague, because both you and I are specialists, and we're specialists in like a very like hyper focus. Like it's not just a specialty, it's like, magnification specialty. Okay.
Right.
So I want people to understand that, like, and when I talked about cortisol and stress, okay, in the last unprecedented times, in the last 2 years, we have, as a community, been through the higher levels of stress, and we are seeing a lot of stress-driven hair growth. Okay. And with women with PCOS, or I would say with individuals with PCOS, let's take the gender off of this. Okay. Understanding that our body's response to stress, whatever that stress may be, can create excess hair. And as long as we are unmanaged in that understanding, and I'm not saying that we can get rid of the stress. These are a lot of times things that we cannot control, but how we face that, both medicinally and holistically. So like the whole body approach to this will help start to balance that, because even within myself, one of the biggest things I faced in the last 2 years was elevation of my cortisol, and my adrenals tanked. So I had no way to fight the feeling of stress. I had no energy to do so. And
it's like all these resilience, right? It's like, it's just being beat down one after the other.
Exactly. And so when people are coming in and they're not managing anything at all, and they don't even know what to ask for, because it's like, well, I went into my doctor, they did my labs, and we tested my hormones, and they said everything's within range. The fraction within range is such a small amount. And I don't think people realize how small that within range is to create chaos when it's at limit.
Exactly.
It doesn't take much to grow hair.
Right.
But it takes a lot to get rid of it and manage it.
Exactly. And another thing about lab work that I really like to talk about is the ranges we go off of. They're not like these set in stone things, right? Different labs set up different ranges based on their own data gathering. So at the end of the day, if you're feeling symptomatic and you're saying, hey, I'm having painful periods, I'm having hirsutism, I'm having hormonal acne, all these things, I think that they might take some precedence over the lab work that comes out totally normal. There are also like specialty labs that a lot of integrative and naturopathic doctors do, but that gets really expensive and very, very overwhelming for the patient that's just starting off trying to figure out what to do. So I think that coming at it with a gentle approach is my number one way of kind of addressing this, because I'm sure as someone from your experience too, PCOS is like this big, big thing, and it can get very, very confusing. So that's just my mentality about the way I like to approach blood work, as well as taking account into symptoms, because what your patient or your client is experiencing is important, and that should not be taken for granted.
Oh yeah. Something just that popped into my head when we were talking about taking that approach and of tiptoeing in. A lot of people have been told by their providers that, like, hey, if we get some weight off you, it'll start to manage your symptoms. The problem is chronic dieting is a form of stress. And so what ends up happening, at least what I see on my table, is people who are in that chronic fluctuation of like diet and then no discipline, and then diet and then no discipline, have more fluctuations with that hair. If I'm watching them kind of chronically come off up and down, I can't get them to their results as fast as someone who finds balance within that nutrition and understands that you will have days. You posted this the other day and I was like, oh yes, we have formatted good versus bad on food.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, understanding that you can have a blending of them as long as you're finding balance within them, that will get you closer to those goals of creating nutritional balance that will take you out of that binge purge cycle, or that then that's one stress down, right? And that's a huge stress because it's so pushed on the PCOS community that like, that's the one thing that's stopping them from management. And that's actually like the one thing that's keeping them from management best from my observations in the last couple of years of diving into this more.
Yeah. I mean, with the weight loss thing, first of all, in society in general, you're taught from a very young age that thinness is goodness. And if you're thin, somehow your issues just go away. And now you're adding a medical diagnosis that's telling you that, hey, if you lose weight, you'll be fine. When in actuality, like you said, that's not the case at all. And my whole point back from the beginning is when we have that cortisol, you have more insulin and you have more testosterone. And then you have all these other hormones that are all these other issues that end up causing and wreaking havoc on the body. So I think that sustainable change and taking baby steps is like the biggest thing. And also approaching food in a more neutral position, because like you said, balance is really important. And with food, especially, I've seen so many patients and clients feel like they can't enjoy their cultural foods, or if they're at a family dinner or at a party, that they have to stay away from what everyone else is eating. And that in and of itself is depleting joy and depleting just community from you. And
Yes.
that I think to me is also causing some sort of stress on your body. So yeah, I get really frustrated when I see people coming to me and saying, oh, I was told that I need to lose weight for my PCOS. I need to lose, my target weight is to be 150 pounds and I'm just stuck on these 5 to 10 pounds and I just really need to get rid of them right now. And it's like, but why? Like, why is that the priority when you're feeling fatigued, when you're struggling with hirsutism, when you're having all these other issues? Why are we focusing on the weight? Like, that's not the problem, babe. Like, that's not the problem. So we need to really just reshift. And I think that conversations like these and like building up community within the PCOS community is really, really, really important, especially right now, because like you said, we all did go through some unprecedented times. And now that we're all like kind of out of that, I know everyone is like hot girl summer or hot, whatever. And it's like all this toxic stuff is coming back, and this feeding from the media, it's like it just is all coming back. And I just really get frustrated to see it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, after I competed in my bodybuilding show, and I'm very proud of the fact that like I have gone through such an amazing journey, and I really enjoyed the team spirit in that. Okay. So this is not Stephanie pooping on that community. This is Stephanie saying, at the end of the day, I understand now that I pulled the rubber band too tight. Okay. And now it broke because it had tension on it and tight for a long time. And now I got to figure out how to fix and mend that break. And, I will say that like, I mean, I'm still, you guys will see this in like my Instagram, content and that kind of stuff, is that at the end of the day, I still do things that bring me like physical fitness joy. I love to lift weights and go for hikes and do yoga. The early half of this year, we were trying to really focus on my stressors, right? And so I went to parasympathetic movement, and it was like just like walks and like meditation. And I will tell you, it's great, but it was the hardest thing for this high-strung individual. And that's that moment that you realize, God, if it's that hard, it's probably because I need to like mold it in a little bit more, get it working into that cycle. Because I would sit here and I'm like, guided meditation. Okay, well, I hear the dogs are currently playing inside their kennel, and I hear the cat is playing inside her cat tree, and I hear the water dispenser is going through the ice maker. Like, it was not guided meditation. It was Stephanie plugged in. And those things, like coming into a space when you're coming in for like major hair removal, understand that those little changes to give yourself joy and stop restricting yourself. And so much when you're stressed out is going to help balance you in between the stuff that you're doing medicinally. Excuse me. So like, that's
so
huge.
Actually, psychology was my first. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, it's just huge.
Right.
Yeah. You're good.
It is. Yeah. I was just gonna say that like psychology was my first love. It's what I studied in undergrad.
Mhm.
And then because of my own like medical history, I fell in love with the PCOS community and just really being a voice of reason and just advocating for us,
Mhm.
which is why I feel like me and you related on that level like immediately.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm saying this because, you know, in the PCOS community, we are 3 to 7 times more likely to experience anxiety, depression, insomnia, body and gender dysmorphia, along with OCD. So we have all these mental health concerns that we need to take care of. And the body and gender dysmorphia is big for me and a big for a lot of patients and clients because we feel like we lose the weight, our symptoms come back, our hair starts growing back, the hirsutism goes away. But all it just puts more and more pressure on, as if I'm the problem, as if what I'm doing is the root cause of all of my issues. And it just, I think it puts a lot of people in an unfair position and a place where you start lacking compassion for yourself. And I think that's like a really big thing with a lot of PCOS patients. I remember when I got diagnosed, I was still a medical student. And shortly after, I was sitting in gynecology class. And I'm hearing all these things about PCOS and facts like these are the risk factors and these are the complications later. Okay, so when I was diagnosed with PCOS in 2018, I was still a medical student. And I remember sitting in gynecology class shortly after and learning about PCOS and hearing all these risk factors for why it's caused and all these later in life complications that can happen, right? Like you're more than likely to have cancer of some sort. You're more than likely to have type 2 diabetes, heart disease. And I just remember feeling so disgruntled because it was all just making it seem like no matter what I did, there was always going to be some complication later in life that I was always going to have to think about and always have to be like hyper vigilant about, like really trying to prevent. And so I think that, like I said, just coming at it from a more neutral position is life changing because it just, again, teaches you to be a little bit more compassionate and a little bit more gentle with the way that you're going through managing PCOS and just in life. Like
Yes.
there's so much that we've all gone through. And I'm sure you've seen it, like you said, on the table where there's all this stress happening and then the symptoms kind of follow, right?
Yes.
So that's my soapbox and my TED talk.
No. And that's the thing is like, that's why I do these videos is because at the end of the day, you know, I have walked so many people through the journey of unwanted hair. Okay. Right. Whether it be because you're cisgender and you're having hirsutism and male pattern growth and you do not feel confident in that. Okay. And I am definitely the kind of electrologist / laser technician that says if body hair doesn't bother you, rock it. I fully believe, like I'm about body positivity, but if it's not making you feel good, because when I was a kid, I was a mustache kid, I had my electrolysis when I was 12. Mm-hmm. I get what that does to someone's psyche, right? And those are the little moments that if I could go back and tell 12-year-old Stephanie that you aren't less than perfect because you're hairier or you're curvier than your friends. Okay. You're not less than. Right. They're just not taught to love themselves. Right. If I could go back and have that conversation with my 12-year-old self, by all means, I would snap that into existence right now. But the fact is now we're having to unpack that, fix that, and help somebody feel better. And I will tell you, like, I did it again. Okay. All of these, right? All these types of hair problems, the person up top is just as valid in their frustration with their hair as the person on the bottom, because it is their dysphoria. Exactly. It is not mine. And I will help guide somebody. Like if I see somebody with the top problem, okay, which is natural peach fuzz, everybody that's vellus hair. Okay. That is natural peach fuzz, and that's good to have, okay? But if it bothers you, I will walk you through what we can remove and reduce while still preserving your skin, because you do need to have peach fuzz for your body to do like natural order things, okay? It's a part of being a mammal. We have fuzz so that we can protect ourselves. But if it gets worse, right, and it's really problematic for you, there are ways to go about it. And that's where I come in, right? But if I see it look like this one down here, or even the one just above, these are steps into understanding something behind the scenes. Because while neither one of them are any less valuable for having the hair, this is telling me, this symptom right here is telling me, the technician, that there are things behind the scenes that I will be chasing as your technician for a decade or more of hair removal. And that's because this is a symptom of something happening behind the scenes. And when someone comes to me and says, hey, Steph, I have a hair problem, this is what it looks like, right? And I say, what have we done to address this problem? Like, where are we at? Is it just bugging you and you came to me and I'm your first question? Because I have people all the time, it's like, oh, I don't want to talk to my doctor about this. This is so weird. And I'm like, no, this is it. It's not weird. It's a symptom. And it's right. We need to go in and dive in deep to this to figure out, because you're going to continue to have this symptom until we get to the solution, which is like, I mean, I'm a fan of taking care of your health at all costs. Okay. Cause you only got one body to live in. So, now I will dive into this just so that you as a doctor and you as the patient watching this, or a technician that's watching this, understand that there are different levels of like red flags as a technician. Okay. Now these first two pictures, okay, 1 and 2 up top, those first two pictures are what we call a vellus hair. The second picture is an accelerated vellus hair. It's a transitional hair. Okay. And the second and third picture are the same type of hair, but it's a blonde versus a brunette. Okay. Now, when someone comes in with this top one, okay, I have zero, and they're like, I have a hair problem. This is not a hair problem. This is you wanting to solve problematic hairs for you. Okay. And I will flat out tell them that there's no testing that needs to be done. There's nothing to be concerned about. There's nothing to red flag. This is just going to take a long time because it's like defuzzing a peach. Okay.
Yeah.
And like brown individuals, we are brown fuzzed peaches. Okay. We're not blonde fuzz peaches. And so we see our hair and it's problematic because of the color of it. But if you have more active melanin, you will have more actively dark hairs. And that's because blonde hairs usually don't appear on brown people. Okay. Because it's not common. And that's not it's not completely impossible, because you see people with like vitiligo and that kind of stuff. But those are conditions, once again, that we are diving into and being like, okay, you see this? This is a symptom to say that. Okay. Now, when I have a patient that comes in with picture 2 or 3, okay, and I start to see an individual terminal hair, like picture 4 down here, okay, creep into those areas, that is starting to tell me that there is something deeper that I will have to chase, and they will be struggling with a long time. So that's when I, the technician, I'm like, okay, if pictures 2 through 4 happen, we need to seek medical guidance. And that's because there are steps that you can do in pictures 2 and 3 that will help reduce the possibility of picture 4.
Yeah.
Okay. So does that make sense, that like as a technician explaining that?
It does. And this is like information I'm just like thinking about, like me as a teenager. Like I wish I was able to watch a YouTube video like this, because I could have probably prevented some of 4 happening. You know, if I had known that, like, hey, 2 and 3, you know, while not super problematic, could be inkling towards something else. So this is very helpful.
And that's when, okay, so that you and I have talked about this briefly, but that's when like other things other than electrolysis and laser can step in and help. Okay. So for example, I myself, I've had to do spironolactone over the years. I've done birth control over the years. these are ways to manage that. That's heavy medicinal, in my opinion. Okay.
Right.
With contraindications. Okay. That I could have stepped in at that point to stop terminal hair growth. Now, I don't personally like to push people like in that direction. So if you can step in with like inositol, I always say that one wrong. It's definitely, I'm like, so inositol. In the PCOS community, we know that as like Ovasitol, but that's going to be a good step into that direction. I know that from my own journey, right? But yes, there are things like tea and turmeric and like there are things exactly.
Saw palmetto, spearmint tea, licorice, peony. There's so many things that like can help.
But they only can help when it looks like 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Because once it goes to 4,
right,
that is going to be one of those factors that the only thing we can do from there is hair removal. And I'm talking electrolysis and or laser. Okay. As a technician, when I have somebody come in as a consultation, and I'm going to talk from 4 and then work my way backwards. So if I have somebody come in with severe hair growth, which is called terminal hair growth, and it's what we see in picture 4 here. That patient is a borderline patient between laser and electrolysis. Now, we have electrolysis, thermolysis, and blend in your electrolysis category. In your laser hair removal category, we're going to talk about true laser only, not IPL, because I will never push somebody into IPL for hair removal. Okay. And that's because it technically is not hair removal. It's meant for photo rejuvenation. So as I'm working on somebody that has stubborn hair growth that looks like number 4, one of the big things that I face is the decision of when to go into laser and when to go into electrolysis. Now, dense growth, usually in the chin, upper lip, and neck area, can have, and when I say dense growth, every hair follicle has a name. Okay, so we're talking beard style growth. Laser hair removal can reduce the volume and the amount of hair in that area permanently, as long as there is enough contrast of color. If there is not enough contrast of color, that's when I go, it is only a tool for permanent hair reduction. Okay. So yes, you were talking to a hairless Italian and 99% of my body was done with laser. Okay. And super glad about that. But I made that choice because there was no way, as brown and fuzzy as I was, that I was going to do that with electrolysis. Okay. So when I have a patient come in this way, my first thing is going to be like, 1, are we managed? Okay. Is our hormone hair growth managed? If the answer is no, my direction is then to say, okay, here's Dr. Dalal's information. We need to get you managed. Okay. So that's my first step. In the meantime, I'm going to worry about the hairs in front of me right now. A patient like number 4 can start off with laser as long as the contrast of color is there and the density is there. That's going to reduce the volume of their hair, and then we'll be able to fine tune with electrolysis. Electrolysis is going to help us on everything else. Okay. So if that density is not there, if it's like, the incidental, like the sprinkling of hairs, that's going to be electrolysis because there's nothing for the laser to target. And then the choice of electrolysis, online you talk about electrolysis, thermolysis, and the blend. You talk about the different wavelengths of laser. That choice is then dependent on the basically treatment plan and patient, like what their body's going to respond as. So when you're seeing a patient on your table and you're like, you know what, I'm going to send somebody over to Stephanie because it's going to look like this. Okay. You're saying, okay, if it looks like number 4, there's a high probability that you're going to benefit a little from laser, and then she'll follow up with electrolysis. But it gives both like avenues of me going, okay, so 2 through 4 is to Dr. Dalal, and then, 2 through 4 is also going to Stephanie, right? And it's understanding how to consult the patient to say, okay, me, the technician, this is what I have to ask for my patient to figure out if there's something going on. And then on your side, this is what you should be getting a consult on to start with, because there's so much misinformation and there's a lot of like, basically like, I don't want to say arguing because it's not the right word for it, but disagreements in the community.
I agree.
On both sides.
Yeah.
To give proper information. It's like, no, we can bring it all together and like give you one epic treatment plan between.
Exactly. And I think what you're talking about is super, super important, because as someone who's struggled with hirsutism and those terminal hairs, I was like, you know what? It's fine. I'll just take some inositol. I'll take the spearmint tea and drink my 10 cups a day. And it gives you this false hope that like you're going to be able to treat number 4, when in actuality, I wish I was watching this video, maybe a couple years ago, because it really helps to decrease that frustration. Finally being able to say to yourself, like, hey, it's okay to get some sort of permanent hair removal for that issue, while also working on the underlying cause with other things, right?
Yeah, because we're stopping future problems from happening.
Right. I probably would have saved myself so much frustration and money as well, instead of just like hoping that the spearmint tea and the saw palmetto and all these other things, or even the spironolactone or the birth control would have helped. So yeah, no, I really appreciate this breakdown.
Oh yeah. And like, I mean, I was like, oh, we're going to have so much fun today. Because it's one of those things that like, we're usually having to re-educate our patients and understanding of like what to expect. It's like, those books, like What to Expect When You're Expecting. Okay. Yeah. It's like what to expect when you're expecting more hirsutism, because the fact is, if you got it, we got to figure out why. And like, then we got to figure out, okay, at stage 1, you're doing this, stage 2, you're doing this, stage 3, and like going along the line so that they understand that, we're not magicians, we're technicians. Okay.
Right.
We're treatment specialists, and all we can do is help them get to the next step, but they got to also be their own champions in their health, because nobody can advocate for you like you. So that's a huge factor. So, when I was talking about modalities, I do want to cover this just so that people understand. Okay. So electrolysis, thermolysis, and blend. Okay. Electrolysis is a chemical change. Thermolysis is heat-based, and blend is a combination of the two. Your technician decides on what is best on the day of treatment for what they're facing that day. So your levels may change over time. Okay. How much energy, people always talk about, like, crank it up to 10. I want it dead. And it's like, no, because that's not how this works.
Please don't.
Please don't. Right. Like, no, we're not going to do that. So that's one of the big things. And then the other thing is like contraindications, right? Some people can't have electrolysis because they might have a pacemaker or a metallic device in their body of some type, cochlear implants. There are a few different ways why we wouldn't do that, because we would be disrupting other electrical charge. Okay. On the thermolysis side, some people don't have the style of hair that thermolysis by itself is like the driving factor of permanent reduction. And so you might say, okay, you got terminal hair growth and a lot of it. We're not going to put that much thermolysis into an area because we need to be able to calm it down without being all trauma to the skin, because thermolysis is heat. Right. So all we're doing is cauterizing. Yeah. And then blending.
We don't want to like cause too much inflammation in that area.
Inflammation. You don't want to cause tissue disruption. So you don't want to go in there and like just break down the elastin and collagen fibers, because it's very hard to rejuvenate that. And hair is volume. If we think of like, this is my little thing right here. Okay. So this is, okay, Stephanie, the teacher mode. Okay. So we have all these pens. These are all the hairs in an area. Well, if I take these hairs out of the area, I still have loss of volume, and that's going to close up. Okay. And that volume loss, like over time, your skin shrinks, but as an immediate, you'll see trauma to the skin that is hard to repair And so you don't want to go too far. And then on the laser side of things, okay, so we have electrolysis, thermolysis, and blend. On laser, you also have different depths of heat into the skin, okay? So you have alexandrite, diode, and YAG. Those are your most common wavelengths with laser hair removal. The most common one to see in other practices is diode, because most diode devices are more affordable for a technician, okay? So they might have to like tiptoe in there. But diode is kind of a middle ground. It's not so great with super deep terminal hairs, and it's not so great with like middle range hairs. It's because it's hitting two different parts of that follicle, okay? But with alexandrite, you're basically hitting from the surface of the skin down to the base of a terminal papilla, okay? So that full length of that anagen hair. With a diode, you're going just below the surface of the skin to bypass that melanin, so you can treat someone like you and I, where we have rich melanin, but like we're not super dark, okay? You can treat that, but the problem is because you're missing your target a little bit, your reduction rate ends up being less, and you have to compensate for that skin color. So that's when you see a lot of people getting the paradoxical hypertrichosis, because what ends up happening is they've stimulated blood flow versus breaking it down. Okay. So they miss that target.
Okay.
And then you have YAG, okay, which is a 1064, which bypasses that area and just treats the derma papilla, so that you have a better treatment on darker skin types, because you were able to bypass where that skin color is really sitting at the rich surface of the skin and still treat that. All wavelengths have a purpose, but you have to make sure that you have the eye for the person on the table, because if someone goes for the wrong wavelength for that person, that's when you have stimulation of growth. Or when I say wrong wavelength, I'm also talking wrong density and packing in that area. If the hairs aren't there, there's no target. No target is just heat. Just heat is stimulation. So
yeah, okay.
That's like that rejuvenation laser, right? That's
right.
So you have to like make those considerations. And when you're having these treatments, you also have to make the final consideration of how much can you do to get the job done in a certain timeline? Can you meet me the same way for your treatment plan? And that's the last consideration.
Okay. That was immensely helpful, because obviously, as someone who has gotten electrolysis done, when I was in this whole research rabbit hole of laser versus electrolysis and just trying to figure out what to do, and then hearing stories about, like you said, the hypertrichosis, or how more melanated skins were having like white patches, loss of melanin. There's all these different things. So of course, as a client, as a potential client, I'm getting really nervous. I'm like, oh gosh, I hope that like everything goes well. And I don't know, there's a lot of videos on YouTube as well of people of darker skin having issues. But this was obviously such a good breakdown, because it not only empowers potential clients going in for electrolysis and laser, but it's also really good as a physician, because now I can kind of guide people the right way and kind of educate them as well. Because obviously you're going to do that.
Yeah.
But even for me, introducing something like this as a treatment or as something to manage hirsutism or hair growth it was a really good breakdown for me as well.
Well, I'm glad that was helpful, because the thing is like, I mean, just diving into my own health and wellness in the last couple of years and having new hair growth as a symptom, being like, all right, this is what I got to talk about with people, because if you're unmanaged, you will be chasing those follicles for a long time.
Yeah.
So, for myself, I have no closing remarks other than the fact to say thank you. Thank you for making this space for us, because I know that we are taking from possible practice time when we have these conversations. So thank you for being there. But also, I'm so excited to have a resource like you here in Arizona, because I'll tell you right now, it's hard to find PCOS specialists overall. But it's nice to know that there's somebody that's actually like actively trying to do something about it, that believes in HAES and believes in like understanding that LGBTQI people have to have a place that's safe as well, that need that care. It's like, I am so excited to have you here.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you so much. And for anyone that's watching the video, the reason how I even got in contact with Stephanie is amazing, because I had just mentioned to my electrologist that, I'm a naturopathic doctor and I focus on PCOS. And so she connected you guys like as I was checking out, and I'm like walking to my car and I get a phone call from the med spa, sends a hello, and I'm like, I hope everything's okay. And then it was you, and you're like, please, let's connect, let's meet up, let's chat. And I just loved it. And I just love that we were able to connect, and you also created this space to have this conversation and kind of understand my approach and how naturopathic medicine can play into management of hirsutism and PCOS. And like you said, like both of us are here out in Arizona trying to create a space for people to feel comfortable and safe and stop gaslighting their symptoms. So I think that this was wonderful.
So so one, yesterday I had asked this of you. So you treat just here in Arizona. However, you can do consultations across the US, correct?
Yeah. So I do virtual. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Would that help somebody? Would you be able to help somebody find somebody in their area?
So it works a little differently. So with naturopathic medicine and naturopathic doctors, we go by individual state licensure. So I'm in Arizona, I'm licensed in Arizona, so I can see patients, order labs, diagnose and treat. For anyone living outside of Arizona, I can still help clients with health consultation. So you can describe to me your symptoms. I can then give you general recommendations for what you're going through. I just am not in the position to diagnose and treat like a physician would, but in that case, your PCP should be able to order labs. And for me, I would be able to look at them and just interpret them based on my acknowledgement and my, the way that I approach it. But again, I cannot diagnose and treat if someone lives outside of the state. So there's actually a lot of NDs that do that. They see clients virtually outside of the state of their licensure, because so many of us are looking for this, especially for me, coming from South Carolina. I wish that I had an ND or at least someone that could give me naturopathic health consulting. So that just kind of clarifies it, I hope, for anyone watching this.
And that's the other part of this. So if you don't have a technician like myself in your area and you're watching this, please do not hesitate to reach out, because I've been doing education on a global scale for a long time with electrologists and laser technicians out there. I do have connections in other states. I can help guide you into a treatment plan that would be good for you. I obviously unless you're traveling out to me, I cannot treat. It's so same deal. Now, what is your website for everybody?
Yeah, it's www.dravnidalal, DravNidalal.com. Really simple, dravnidalal.com. Yeah.
And that information is also going to be in the comment section later, so that you guys can, if you have more questions for her and you're wanting to reach out and see about getting a consultation, by all means, this is why I'm doing this. I want more exposure for people to understand that you're not alone when you have a hormone problem. You're not alone when you have a hirsutism problem, because at the end of the day, this is my 19th year in practice. We've been in practice. Our Sons of Pella has been around for 40 years. And so at the end of the day, we would not be doing this for a living if there wasn't that many people for hair. And it's growing. People are getting diagnosis faster and better. So we can help guide you to make those decisions. So I will be putting stuff in the comment section so that you can reach out to either one of us and be able to get the care that you need when you're ready. So, but
Perfect.
Thank you so much again. And I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording and just say, peace, love, and hair removal. And and I can't wait to watch your practice grow out here. Welcome to Arizona, and we will figure this all out. So, thank you.
Yeah.